All reasonable people are tormented by one question. How has Putin managed for so many years to avoid punishment for his crimes against humanity, which his double, after a bit of cognac, affectionately calls action?
You know, when everything is calm, measured, and stable for us, we get bored. Stagnation. We want some action.
Why does civilized Europe keep mumbling and can't put the cigarette butt in his place? Because with Putin's arrival, the Kremlin opened a marketplace there called Useful Greedy Idiots. Moscow was buying up politicians and public figures in bulk, as well as representatives of the arts and media, basically anything that was poorly guarded and preferably smelled bad.
Ew! Please, Dennis, do something. It really reeks in here.
They leased not only washed-up directors like Usturica, but even entire prime ministers.
What is happening in Ukraine right now is a struggle for Usway, who saw what happened with those banderites in Croatia when they expelled 230,000 Serbs.
As a rule, Moscow is supported by far-right populists of a fascist persuasion. They are against Mickey Mouse, Coca-Cola and migrants, and everyone praises Putin very highly.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Front, at the Kremlin.
I have long urged France and Russia to renew their cultural.
All these Kremlin forces are corroding the EU from within, blocking or at least slowing the adoption of anti-Russian decisions as much as possible.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán told European Union leaders that he intends to wait for the inauguration of US President-elect Donald Trump on January 20, and only after that will he make a decision regarding the extension of EU sanctions against Russia, Bloomberg reported, citing sources. To extend the sanctions, a unanimous decision by all 27 EU member states is required, and Orbán could veto it. In turn, Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico stated that the Slovak authorities intend to block any possible European Union sanctions against Russia in the field of nuclear energy.
But fortunately, all these Kremlin assets, even while in power, do not have widespread support in society. Their excessive and relentless love for Putin and Kremlin money is starting to sober up even their most loyal electorate. Slovak prosecutors are investigating after Robert Fico visited Moscow.
Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico faced sharp criticism after his visit to Moscow. Fico's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin took place against the backdrop of the expiring agreement on the transit of Russian gas to Europe through Ukrainian territory.
Fico went to complain to his employer that Ukraine is stopping the transit of Russian gas. Fico got so worked up that he even threatened Kyiv with cutting off electricity supplies. In winter, right when the occupiers are constantly striking the power system.
Oh, you
damn Bolshevik scum!
I listened to details on electricity imports from the EU via Slovakia. It's about 19%. That's out of the total volume. We are working with other neighbors in the EU, and I have instructed our government members to do everything together with the European Commission and all our partners in Europe to maintain the stability of the unified European energy system. No matter what Putin told Fico when he was in the Kremlin, European rules must be stronger than any individual's ties to Moscow.
The public association Peace for Ukraine submitted a request to the prosecutor's office to investigate this Buratino and shake him down for any rubles in his pockets. The people of Slovakia have also clearly demonstrated their attitude towards Fico's policies. In response to the Slovak government's refusal to join the Czech initiative to purchase shells for Ukraine, ordinary Slovaks themselves launched a fundraising campaign to buy shells and have already raised more than 4.5 million euros.
There was also criticism of Fico in Bratislava. Michal Šimečka, the head of the opposition party Progressive Slovakia, said that Fico has turned the state into a tool of Russian propaganda. Šimečka called Fico's visit to Moscow a disgrace for the country and a betrayal of national interests.
The only one who can rival Fico in his affection for the Kremlin's Führer is Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Near Rostov, Yanukovych is sad as Putin has traded him for another Vitya.
I did not resign my powers ahead of schedule.
I'm live.
Orban is one of the most notorious whitewashers of Moscow. He opposes sanctions and aid to Ukraine. He fights so desperately for the Kremlin's interests that an awkward question arises. What exactly does Moscow have on Orban?
If you know what I mean.
Most likely, it's not just about the money. The Hungarian opposition even submitted a parliamentary inquiry to the Minister of Internal Affairs to investigate information about Orban's connections with Russian organized crime.
Welcome to our humble abode.
Investigative journalists discovered that the Hungarian Prime Minister had dealings with the crime boss Semyon Mogilevich, and that this Mogilevich recorded on video all instances of money being handed over to Viktor. And since it's no secret that the FSB protects all Russian organized crime groups, it means the Kremlin has some interesting compromising material on Orban.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
That's why the Hungarian Yukovic is sweating it out for Moscow's interests, so he doesn't end up spending many years in prison at home for corruption, treason, and ties to the mafia. But Nikolai, I have an idiot in prison. You'll end up behind bars and rot in jail. In the EU, they've finally grown tired of putting up with Orban's anti-European policies and have given him a public scolding. They call him a swindler to his face, Putin's useful idiot, and the biggest corrupt official in Europe. German MP Daniel Freund directly accused Orban of stealing European funds that were allocated for repairing Hungarian roads and schools. Instead, the money was spent on building palaces. It's no wonder that European politicians are even reluctant to shake Orban's hand. The president of Romania, for example, didn't even try to hide his attitude toward Putin's lackey.
Upon arriving at the summit, Iohannis got out of the car and demonstratively turned his back to Orban and the welcoming party. He then started adjusting his jacket. During this time, the Hungarian Prime Minister stood still and, noticing that Iohannis was delaying the greeting, gave a slight smile. The President of Romania approached Orban and shook his hand after 15 seconds. Journalists have already called Iohannis' behavior extremely disrespectful and undiplomatic.
With his pro-Putin stance, Orban is putting all of Hungary at risk, because there are increasingly frequent calls within the EU to strip Budapest of its voting rights and financial support. Naturally, the Hungarian people are not happy about this, and Orban stands a real chance of joining Viktor I at his dacha. Putin's matryoshkas have started getting slapped not only in Slovakia and Hungary, but all across Europe. In Serbia, there are mass protests against President Vučić, the fan of Kulibiaka and Šči. He refused to impose sanctions against Russia. In his opinion, the attack on Ukraine is not a sufficient reason. But for the Serbs themselves, Vučić has proven to be no better an ally than he is for Ukrainians. In his 10 years in power, he has built a true Russian world with crumbling infrastructure and an overfed bureaucratic elite.
Belgrade is chanting, whistling and roaring with vuvuzelas. Over the weekend, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of the Serbian capital with three demands. The president of the country, Vučić, Prime Minister Vučić and the mayor of Novi Sad, Durić, must all resign.
The trigger for the brewing popular uprising was a tragedy in the city of Novi Sad. There, at the train station, the roof collapsed and buried people underneath. But the thing is, that roof had just been repaired.
Is that really confirmed?
Obviously, in the best traditions of corruption, all the money for construction was pocketed. So for the repairs, all they could afford was a bit of tape and a roll of twine. Serbian society simply boiled over with indignation. People took to the streets with slogans, "Vučić is a thief!"
I really don't know. What else could possibly happen in a country where nothing works? No one is held accountable for anything. The state of Serbia was responsible for the reconstruction of this station.
It's hard to be a friend of Putin and still remain a normal person. Although, in principle, a normal person can't become a friend of Putin.
But most likely this is really some kind of conspiracy.
If in Slovakia, Hungary and Serbia they're only trying to kick out the Kremlin's minions, then in Romania they caught on in time and didn't let them come to power. There, it's classic. Moscow tried to rig the elections and make the city madman and big fan of the Russian world, Călin Georgescu, president. This Romanian boy in his underwear turned out to be a fascist, a conspiracy theorist, and a fan of the Third Reich. Admit it. It's no surprise that he supports Putin. Vladimir Putin is a leader. He has more than the others in your analysis. He loves Sarah, despite what he's involved in. Despite, wait, during... Georgescu glorifies the ally and best friend of Hitler, the dictator Antonescu. He hates the European Union and NATO. He regularly quotes Russia Today and believes that Russia is the only normal country on the planet. He likes to mention Tinde Romania. He often talks about Tinde Romania. Georgescu is also convinced that people are being chipped through the slot and that the world is ruled by Masonic pedophiles. The problem is that all these oligarchs are connected to the pedophilia system. And this reptiloid, in the 20th century, in a European Union country, notably wins the first round of the presidential elections. How is that even possible? A mass delusion of the Romanian people? Of course not. It was massive fraud and direct Kremlin interference in the elections. There was proven unprecedented cyber attacks from Moscow that affected the vote count. The Romanian court annulled the controversial election results and sent Putin's jester to hell.
Who are you people? I didn't invite you! Get out!
Now, after the downing of the Azerbaijani airliner and Moscow's shameful excuses, the Russian world is being chased out of Azerbaijan with dirty rags as well. They have already tightened the rules for Russian citizens staying in the country. If you add Bulgaria to this, which expelled almost 100 Russian diplomats, then these are no longer warning bells, but a full-blown alarm announcing the start of a major purge of the civilized world from Moscow's sellouts, useful idiots, and outright agents of the security services.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.